it's a movement. We're talking about unity. We're talking about unity. So we're aimed to taking down the system of race by educating, enlightening, informing, and positively debating with those who have counterviews.
Welcome to the Edge Radio TV Network. I'm pleased that you've joined me today. I'm Richard Jennings, and I am your amiable co-host. And along with my co-host, Carlen Charleston, we talk about unity.
We're really excited to be in the studio today because we've got, for the second week in a row, we've got a live in-studio guest. And we're really excited to have our guest today from West Houston Counseling Service. We've got Miss Kelly Cannon Payton's in the house. And so we're really excited to have her here. And so we're really going to get to that. But we got a lot of things to cover. And you might try to get some online therapy today, free online therapy while she's here, because anytime she speaks, then it's going to be therapeutic because she's talking about the stuff that she knows, and it's really good. So we're excited about that. That's going to happen later on in our show. But first, let's cover some current events. Lots of things happening in our country, as you know. And so we want to cover that. So, Richard, what we got happening in the field of current events today?
Unless you're living under a rock, you heard that President Trump came down with corona.
He did?
Yes,
wow. Oh, yeah.
He did.
I know about that.
And not only did he come down with corona, but they took him to the military hospital. They fixed him up. And,
I was in the military. I think I would really stay out in the civilian hospital if I was getting care. But he's the president, so it might be better.
Yeah, maybe a little better. Well, he's now out of the hospital. Hasn't had a fever. Listen, last night it was 72 hours, and so I saw him. I don't know when it was recorded. It's either late last night or early this morning. Said I haven't felt this good in 20 years.
Yeah, it was last night because I saw that.
You saw that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So now he's back at the White House, back wherever he is,
and people are mad whether he's in the hospital or at the White House.
Did you see that?
It's crazy.
He was so before they release him to come home. He gets in his presidential SUV, and the guys are up front masked up, and they're all got the barrier window. He's in the car, windows rolled up, with his mask on, just kind of waving to the crowds that are outside there, praying for him, encouraging him. And people are so mad. You're exposing the world to his disease, right?
Welcome to the divided states of America.
Woo,
that's kind of where we are.
Divided states of America.
So that's why when you get Kelly Cannon Payton up here today, then she's going to talk to you about the trauma that we're all experiencing as a result of all that hate and animosity that's happening out there. We got to fix that.
So what I want to say about this one is we really need to, in light of Corona, he said, don't be afraid of it. You'll get over it. I appreciate his enthusiasm and his being positive. But the bottom line is it is a dangerous virus. It is unpredictable. The elderly are susceptible to it and have lots of friends and family in the medical community. And this is a dangerous deal. We don't take it lightly. So until we can get past this, people do need to practice social distancing and just be safe. Wash your hands. Don't touch your eyes. The whole 9 yards.
Now, he's 74.
Yep.
He's 74. And I saw on some of the news reports, they were all talking about the fact that he's clinically obese. They were talking about he's overweight.
Yeah.
And I was like, clinically obese? What does that mean?
Well, I am too.
I mean, I think so. I think I might even be. I think I am too. So, I mean, it's like, so. But, so what do you think about the fact that, or it looks like he went in, came out really quickly, fast. I mean,
Yeah.
And is it because he's getting all these experimental drugs? Did he get that hydroxychloroquine or something that he was
hear that
touting?
he got? There was this whatever it is, or
I
some
remember
drug like that. Anyway, whatever they used worked, and hopefully they can replicate that to the general population. Whatever's working, we need to use. Let's not use people as guinea pigs. If you find something that's really, really working, come on, let's figure that out and replicate that. I know vaccines are coming. They're saying pretty quick, and so hopefully they fully vet, test, do everything they need to do to keep our population safe. I just really don't like. So the thing that I really wanted to hit with this is how divisive our country is about it. The social media feeds, how he's wish that corona, if it's going to kill anybody, let it kill him. how shameful is that?
There were
You
people,
know,
I haven't been
you
out on
don't
social
want-
media the last day or so, but
Yeah,
a lot of people doing
A
that.
lot of people doing that.
Talking about letting him die.
Yeah, wanting him to die. In fact, praying for him to die. Hey, that's witchcraft. You gotta be careful with that nonsense. So
Yeah, it's crazy.
there's that, and just everybody's so divided.
And they're not
over-
talking about unity. That's why you need to be tuned in here every Tuesday at 10 a.m. to talk about unity. Watch it on Edge Radio Network Facebook page. Go to eraseraces.com. By the way, I didn't mean to make a commercial, but talk
That's
about
good.
unity.
That's a good
We need
question.
unity. All right, well, go ahead.
Last thing on that is we just really have to be in that place where we're just honest about things. We keep our character in check and don't allow the conspiracy theories to just reign over this thing. Because he got out of the hospital so fast, there's a lot of people running around saying he never had corona, that this is just this big show to just prove how minimal this virus is. Hey, I don't know what you're reading. I don't know how good you are in the know. We need to take it serious and just let some of those things go.
Okay.
Last thing I want to just touch real quick is we want to give our guests a lot of time.
That's right. K2 is in the house.
Such an important topic of what she does. I wanted to talk about this tragedy that happened Saturday. There's this gentleman by the name of Jonathan Price, 31 years of age. He lost his life. He was shot by a police officer. There was a couple inside of a convenience store, and they were having an altercation in the store. Jonathan tries to go intervene to break up the fight. Apparently, someone else had called the police. Him not knowing. The police show up. He turns to the officer. He's kind of engaged, not saying he's enraged. This is my take. Of course, I wasn't there. I didn't see any video. I'm just this is what I'm reading. If I have this wrong, hey, correct me. Let me know. But this is my takeaway from it. He's in this convenience store. He turns from them. Officer walks in, not knowing who's who. As he turns to him, the police take that as a form of aggression because he's already hyped up over trying to help this couple not fight. They tase him. He reacts in an aggressive way towards being tased. Hey, would you react aggressively towards a tase? I mean, come on. I don't know how I'm going to react. Never been tased. Don't want to be. And so as he's reacting from that, the police perceive that as aggression, and they shot him, and he lost his life. I know the officer has been charged. I think he's still in jail. It's my understanding. I mean, this is a few days old, but the bottom line is it is a tragedy. And I want to just say this. If you're in a situation, and I have intervened in domestic situations, assisting law enforcement, and there is a way to do it, and there's a way not to do it. As soon as police show up, your first step should be take a step back, and you should say, I'm here to help. I'm here to Officer, I'm here to help. One of the words that they understand very well is say, I have your six, which means I am backing you up, and just wait for their instructions. And they'll say, tell me real quick, or just get out of the way, let me handle it. But you have to be careful in intervening, because the first thing you do, and especially if you are a CHL holder, a concealed handgun license holder, and you have your weapon, if you have your weapon in hand, the first threat they see is you and your weapon. So you probably don't want to pull that until you are asked to engage. Probably won't be asked to engage, but just a very dangerous situation. That's your weapon is to defend your life, protect your life, not to pretend like you're a police officer.
One of the good things I think that's happening as a result of these, at least the highlighting of the shootings, is that I saw that the officer was immediately charged with murder.
Yes.
And so they're beginning to make a distinction now immediately when you do something that seems like it was a result of negligence on your part as the police officer, then they're beginning to take action. And so I think that's good probably for our country, because it makes everyone understand the level of professionalism needed to do your job. And if you're negligent in doing your job, then there will be consequences. Yeah. So that's probably a good thing for us in the long term.
Yeah.
So
those are my things.
All right, very good. So now that we're up to date, we're just excited about being up to date. Now that we know what's going on, now we can bring in somebody who can solve all these problems.
Oh, come on.
And so our guest today, Kelly Cannon Payton. So after we take a commercial break, we're going to come back and we're going to have Kelly, and we're going to be on that side, and we're going to shoot questions this way to Kelly, and it's just going to be an awesome time. So get your notepad out, get ready to take notes so you can get your therapy session in for today.
Good.
We'll be right back in a second on Talk About Unity. Don't push me because I'm close to the edge.
I'm trying not to lose my head.
Hey, this is the Talk About Unity show where I bring the talk.
And I bring the unity.
And together we talk about unity. Unity is what matters.
Come on.
And right now in our country, that's what we've got to do. So we do that here at Talk About Unity on the Edge Radio Network. Be with us every week.
It's going to be awesome. It always is. And I tell you what, the more we seek first to understand, then be understood, we make progress.
And we like to do that. And that's why everybody's on the brink. We love what we do at Edge Radio because everybody's on the edge. We bring them back from the edge and we bring the unity. So we're just glad to Edge Radio Network every Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. Talk about unity because here at Edge Radio Network, truth still matters.
When people stop talking to each other, society is on the edge. Let's bring them back. Edge Radio, because truth still matters.
Welcome back to Talk About Unity, and we're really excited now because we've got on the set, as you can see, our guest, and this is our second week in a row we've had live in-studio guests, and we're so honored to have licensed professional counselor, Miss Kelly Payton. So glad to have you here, ma'am. We're excited.
I'm excited to be here.
All right. And so let me give you a little bit about her. Of course, I talked about the fact that she's a licensed professional counselor. She works out of West Houston Counseling. So in this day and age and at this time, they've got services that we all need.
Yes.
She counsels in child therapy to adolescent teen counseling as well as adult and family counseling. And as I noticed by looking at her name, when I looked at her bio, she's got all these letters. It's like she's got more certifications than I could even begin to talk about. But the biggest part of what she does is her job as a mom. And she's married to Carrick Payton, and they have 3 children. And wow, that's got to be a load. So that means she's going to be able to tell us during the show today how to not only do the counseling part, but how to raise a family. All right, so she's got a big job ahead of her. And yeah, it's a big job. But so we want to just welcome her and just let's get right into this thing we're going to talk about. Okay, so my first question, of course, my personal first question would be, I would talk to Kelly and say, who needed the most therapy after that first debate, Biden or Trump? Who needed the most? That would be the question.
Me.
You got,
Me.
That's the answer. Yeah. We did, the
Yes,
American people.
yes,
All right.
for sure.
So that would be. But let's get the real. Let me get to some real stuff. All right. So I want to get into really what you do. Just give us a little background on what you do and what you think about where we are, and what has stressed you out in your job right now.
Gosh,
Oh,
that's a whole show right there,
That's a
right?
whole show. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I mean, so you've already covered it. I'm a counselor and typically specialize mostly with children and adolescents, but as a result, you're working with parents and you're working with the families. So a lot of work there and a lot of specialty in trauma. So right now, I would say the whole country is going through trauma.
yes.
Whether that's from COVID or the social justice issues or the elections, it's just a whole trauma after trauma after trauma. And so that has just really been, it's been special. That's the best word I can use. It's just been different from anything I've ever seen before.
And so has it been? I mean, and so this is way beyond anything that you've experienced in your. How many years have you been in practice?
So I've actually been in private practice now for about 8 years. This is my second career. So I went back after my children started school, went back to school, and have been practicing for 8 years in private practice. I did lay counseling before that, so it's always been a passion of mine.
Okay.
Just was like girl interrupted and took a pause and then came back. So, but even talking to people who've been in for decades, they've just never seen anything quite like this.
Way beyond. And is the most of that when people are coming in, are you getting them early? And so are people coming in because they're beginning to be stressed out, or are they just really over the top when they come in now?
Both. I mean, so we have existing clients who are struggling. So maybe ones that were doing better and maybe even getting close to being discharged are now kind of going back through crisis again. And then we have a lot of new people, and then even people I haven't seen in 6-7 years that are coming back saying, wow, I need help again. So it's just kind of been everything. But a lot of people are coming in early, which is good because they're recognizing the signs of their stress. And I think when that happens, we have better outcomes. But our existing people, a lot of them are going through crisis.
Let's go back a little bit, and because I think I taught high school for 12 years, and I taught teenagers, which is really cool to do.
My jam.
Yeah. So and so many of the things I did, I was like, wow, this is big time counseling. I mean, because when you get into and you start to peel that onion back, you find out it's not just them, it's their parents and things like that. All these things are factored in. So give us a layman's definition kind of what counseling really is, and kind of who needs counseling, and how are people really able to identify their need for this thing?
Sure. And I think that definition of counseling would vary depending on what therapist you talk to and what their theoretical orientation was, if you want to use technical terms. But in long and short, it's basically when you have a problem that's affecting your life in some capacity, right? So either that's your enjoyment or your ability to function, whichever one it may be, so you're not kind of living your best life. It's working with another professional who can kind of see what the barriers are for you. And are the skills that you're using in order to cope with your stressors or your distress, are they effective or are they ineffective? Are they helping you reach that best life, the goals that you have for yourself? Are they helping you function interpersonally with your career, with your academics, with your social relationships, and your self-esteem? Are they working for you? Are they functional? And so we help identify the dysfunction and then sort of help you correct those areas and just function overall better.
So as I talked about that, and I'm thinking about some of the parents now, because I think we're in a different era, 50 years ago when it comes to counseling. And did some of those parents grow up because they grew up without the era of counseling and saying, you just got to tough it through, you just got to do this? How does that impact what we're seeing now in this generation of kids? Because are you getting older people who say, I missed this out in my life and I now need that, and so they come in, and maybe then it gives their kids who say, wow, that's something that we can do, because there was a stigma kind of related to that initially many years ago, and I don't know if that still is. But how does that whole thing work out now with generationally speaking?
Yeah, so we do have quite a few, when we talk to parents even, parents who are raised with kind of the suck it up, just hold it in, move on, tough it up.
Deal with it, just cope.
It's mostly just suck it up, right? And a lot of fear-based parenting, right, that took place. And they say, well, it worked for me. My parents did this fear-based parenting for me and it worked, so it'll work for my child. And unfortunately, you have to look at things as they are culturally, historically, the context that we're in now. So a lot of those things that maybe worked then don't work now for a lot of different reasons. But we are seeing a lot of adults coming in saying, hey, I didn't get the connection that I needed. There's a lot of things that they didn't get from their family system. And so that's what really made me want to be a child and adolescent therapist, was when I started seeing adults and realizing that a lot of their issues they were dealing with today started back when they were teenagers, started back when they were children, and had things been dealt with at that point, we wouldn't see them as adults in our center. Right. So then I thought, gosh, if I have such an awesome ability to impact not only the child, but even the family system at an earlier stage, so that then they're not on our adult side of the center, right? Later. So yes, to answer your question, we do see adults coming in and seeking that now. And we do see kids with parents who sometimes don't understand because they didn't have it and they sort of feel like it worked for them. So why isn't it working for their child? So it's kind of both and.
And so how far, and do you see our society, America, as we go through the crisis that we're having now in the country, do you see that stemming the tide of hatred and animosity in our country? Is that something that you think this counseling, because you all, I'm sure, are overworked along with a lot of the other services people, is that a possible solution for stemming the tide of the stuff that we have in the country? Are you able to do that? I know it might be your finger is in the dam. Maybe, do you think that, because we've got to do something. One of the things we do in Erase Race and talk about unity is we're trying to get people to get to the level where they can have conversations. So many people are not even close to being able to have a conversation. They can post something on Facebook and they can tell people how they hate them, but they're not ready for the conversation. They can't even get to so we can dialogue and get to that point. So is counseling going to be the great salvation? Is Kelly Payton going to save the world is my question.
Well,
is she going to save the world?
I wouldn't go that far. But I do think it's a starting point. So I think one of the things that we as therapists have to do is our own work. So I think anyone coming into this field who isn't willing to take a look at their own background, their own history, their own family system, their own trauma, their own, all of it, right? And to work on that first before ever sitting in front of a client. And then also to be able to recognize when they're sitting in front of a client, when it might be coming up again, because that does happen. We have to do that ourselves. So to be able to teach clients to do that for themselves before entering into these conversations, that's what enables you to truly be present with another human being, to say, I can be with you and I can validate what you're experiencing, or to understand and say what you've experienced is true for you, even if I disagree, even if I haven't experienced it, and not to have that turn into some kind of hateful situation. And I think that's the skills that we try to give our clients by modeling it first. So
That's great.
where we can do that, I think it is the foundation for it, but I think it's just the foundation. It's not the full work.
All right. So the bottom line, everyone needs to go out there and get a degree in counseling. And once everybody gets that degree, we'll be good to go. All right.
Or run to a counselor.
Yeah.
I had this question with so much political, social injustice, racial division in our country, whether it's a young person or a parent of young people or adults, I think it's affecting all of us. As they come to you, are you seeing a secondary issue as they don't communicate? What are some of the things that are popping up? As you can tell, it's a hot button. The sirens are going off around us. So are you seeing an increase in addictions, isolation, depression because of all of this dysfunction in our society? And so what are some of the ways that you can bridge that gap?
So I feel like you asked me like 3 questions in one. Okay.
So sorry.
so the first piece is, yes, we're seeing people affected by the situation in the social justice issues and the political issues, on top of already experiencing this isolation and trauma from COVID. Right? So it's just a disaster, because we're more isolated than ever before. We don't have access to our normal coping skills. The things that we were normally doing to function in maybe a healthier way, sometimes not so healthy, but definitely most of the healthier mechanisms, we're now limited. Even going to the gym or hanging out with your friends, doing some of these things that we like to do, vacations, those are limited. We also see a lot of conflict between generations happening too. So I'm seeing parents who have one set of ideas and their youth who have a different set of ideas, and the way that they are not communicating effectively, creating a systemic problem in the family. So that's causing increased dysfunction. And then to kind of get to your second piece, yes, a lot of people are now resorting to coping skills that aren't effective. So when we go to social media and we vent our frustrations in a way where we might be misunderstood, or we just decide to attack people for no reason without sitting down and trying to create relationship or understand where people are really coming from, that's not really effective.
Right.
And we are seeing, of course, increases in substance use and alcohol and drugs and whatnot, self-harming behaviors. So all those things are definitely happening.
Yeah.
And again, it's access to the healthy coping skills are limited now.
Yeah, you talked about some of the things that you all do and how you have to model for your clients. Tell us about your team there. How does it, because I always, whenever I hear stories, and I talked to you some yesterday, I was hearing this, I was going, wow, you'd be a great TV show. because y'all got some dynamics going on in your place. So how does a practice such as you have in counseling, how are you all oriented? Are you all a family? Are you a football team? I mean, everybody's got their specialized position. You stay there. How is that organized? Because I think that'll give people also a clearer view of what happens in a counseling center or for counseling services. Because some people are just, I stay away from that place. It's a crazy house. Whatever. So how are you all oriented?
So I'll say that I honestly believe that West Houston Counseling Center is different from many other practices out there. And I think that shows by the fact we have therapists knocking down our door every day trying to join. And part of that is the fact that we are a family. And we're very intentional about that. And so we kind of joke around. We all have a family system role. So I'm the mom. Jana's the dad. Stephanie is the older sister. We have Tito and Tiffany, who are the children of my sister who ran off and left them. And so, everyone
this
has
is a TV show.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
a TV show happening.
So as we function kind of interpersonally together, we do have sort of a family system going on that we're very well aware of. And when you're new to our practice, we're like, who are you going to be? And so we try to really quickly figure out what your role is in that kind of backside. Then we also have the professional piece, which is more like the football team, right? So you have the football team, they've got their own interpersonal dynamics, but then when you're on the field doing the work, it looks a little different. So we do have our own positions that we have that are very specialized. And I think that because we have so many therapists with so many different specialties, we can probably do just about everything, but we really don't do eating disorders. That's something that we refer out. We just don't have the team of like dietitians and whatnot in-house that I think make that easy. Or if you have severe mental illness, like you're actively hallucinating, then you might need a higher level of care. But if you're looking for outpatient needs, we pretty much have just about everything. And we're all trauma specialists. So.
Oh, great. All right, my last question before we're going to take a commercial break. My last question before we take the break is, can you differentiate counseling from coaching for our viewers? So I know coaching is a big thing now, and everybody's got a coach. And what is the difference between a counselor and a life coach counselor?
I think a lot of people blur those lines, sadly. So the thing with the counselor, to be sure of, is they have that license and a board that's backing their activities. So to make sure that they're using, empirically valid treatment models. And you wouldn't want to be seeing a coach if you had any kind of actual mental illness or diagnosable condition. Anxiety, depression, PTSD, trauma, not appropriate for a coaching level. Coaching is more of, let me find a specific thing that you need. Maybe you're looking for a new career and you just need some guidance on that. Let's get you through these steps, right? But if you have something that would be really affecting your functioning, then that's something you want to. They have the ability to use empirically valid treatment methods.
Oh, great. All right. So you heard that distinction. All right. So don't go to a coach if you've got some real issues. All right. Coaches are going to make you better, but they're not going to fix your issues. All right. So we're going to take a break here. And we're going to be back with Kelly. But one thing before we go, I want to tell you how you can be part of and support us at Talk About Unity. I call this the Unity hoodie. I don't have it on, but I could put it on. But it's got our big one, because that's what we believe, that we're all supposed to be one. We're about the unity. It's got the erase race stuff on the back, whatever. So go out to our website, eraserace.com, and you can actually go to our store and get one of those Unity hoodies and support the cause here. And so we're going to take a break, and we're going to be back with Kelly Payton as we talk some more about the issues not only of unity but sanity.
Well, hello out there. Hey, my name is Dwayne Hines with Real Talk Real Estate, along with my sidekick,
Damian Hughes.
Hey, and we are the double D's of real estate. So look, if you're out there and you've been interested in owning a home, but you've been getting run around and you don't know how the process goes, hey, dial the number on the bottom of your screen. Give us a call. Get some real talk, real solutions on all your real estate concerns. We are the double D's of real estate.
Be sure to catch us every Wednesday on Edge Radio at 11:30 for Real Talk Real Estate. D. Hines, Damian Hughes, the Double D's.
When people stop talking to each other, society is on the edge. Let's bring them back. Edge Radio, because truth still matters.
Welcome back to Talk About Unity, and we've got our guest Kelly Payton here, and we're talking about all that ails America. And so we're going to solve some problems here on today's show, and so we want to continue on. We've really been talking about the licensed professional counselor that she is, and West Houston Counseling Services, and so feel free to peruse that on the web and see what they're up to. They've got a lot of answers for some of your issues, and so we'll deal with that. But we were having the conversation about the impact of some of the events that have been going on in our country. And so I wanted to segue into this really deep question. I think it's a deep question. And so if you defer and say, I'm not going to answer that, you don't have to answer that. We'll move on. All right.
Okay.
But this question is about, I've had so many conversations being the race guy and talk about unity and this unity movement that I've got. And I've talked to what I would refer to as dark-skinned people, pretty much known as black, who talk about 400 years of trauma. And I don't know if you've heard that before, but they talk about 400 years of trauma and their ability, and say they feel like they're carrying trauma from previous generations of 400 years. How would you address that? Is that legitimate? How would you address that? Because you do trauma, and so is that trauma or is that drama? You know, and how would you address that if somebody comes in with 400 years and they say they've got 400 years of trauma? How would you address that?
So the APA actually did a really great recent sort of article on this, outlining some of the current research on this. So in our field, we call this intergenerational trauma. And it has been researched. It's a phenomenon that has been well documented. I will say that if you look at the data, and I'm a data person, most of the studies can say there's some correlation between past trauma. So we look at not just the African slave trauma, but we look at Holocaust survivors, people from Ukraine. There was a group of indigenous people in Canada. I mean, there's so many different groups that you can look at, right? And Holocaust survivors probably have some of the most research, but I also know this group in Ukraine had quite a bit as well. And there is a correlation between the survivors of these traumas and mental health issues in their offspring. Now, some of the data said, okay, maybe there isn't a correlation, so that's where we got a little confused. So they started looking at a different subset of data within the data. And that data suggests that there are different parenting coping styles. And as they started to look at the parent coping styles of those survivors, they started to notice that two kind of coping styles tended to be the ones with the highest rates of mental illness or struggles, whether it be PTSD, addiction, that type of thing, in their offspring and throughout the generations. And so those two coping styles were what they call the victim coping style and the numb coping style. So we can kind of see that there is some intergenerational trauma or effects of that come down. And then there's also been another recent study on some potential genetic components to that. And I don't want to get into it, nor would I even know. It's like all these numbers and letters, gene code.
Epigenetics.
I am not a geneticist. You could talk to my colleague Jana, who used to do all that.
Oh, wow.
But they have seen that there has been some changes that took place in the brains of these survivors that affected different receptors, primarily ones that absorb serotonin, which is just a feel-good mood stabilizer. And that we're seeing those same receptors affected in some of the offspring.
Wow.
And so it's a matter of, again, is that chicken or egg? Did, trauma change the brain and then that brain genetically pass it on? Or are we seeing that the mirror neurons from brain to brain is beginning to change the genetics? I think there's a lot of research still to be done, but there is some validity to it, for sure.
Okay.
As far as the data is concerned. But does that not mean that we can't do anything about it? No.
Right. And so I got to make a note. So talk to Jana about genetics.
Yes.
Jana, genetics. I'm gonna make a note on that because.
Sorry, Jana, just called
I'll be calling her Jana. I'll need Jana for genetics. Yeah, because that is really interesting because when you think about that, I've always said. I said, well, people are passing their pain. I said, yeah, we've done a very good job of passing our pain on. It's kind of like when you pass on, I guess, oral traditions, and orally you pass that on. And so if your parents, I do the same thing. I do a lot of physical fitness things, and I tell people, they said, it's in my genes. I was like, it's not in your genes, it's in your habits. You're doing the same thing with your parents, that you're eating what they ate, and so you pass it on. So I could see how we pass that on. And so I guess your challenge then would be to determine, and you wouldn't have to determine, I guess it's something that would come out during the counseling, how much of that is controlled by them and how much of it is a result of changes that have happened for them physically, what's that?
And you can do a lot of that through, there's a thing we call genograms, and it's a way of sort of mapping the family. And so we start with the person, and then you go backwards to your parents and your grandparents.
This is great. What's it, a genogram?
It's called a genogram, yeah. And there's a lot of different ways to do them. And those of us who kind of look from that family systems perspective, I'm a more developmental perspective, and you can't be a developmental therapist without looking at the family system. It's not really possible. And so you look back through that generational situation, and you can begin to see, well, what were the traumas, what were the attitudes, what were the coping styles, right? And what we saw, for instance, with the data out of Ukraine was that there was a lot of the parents saying, well, you can't trust society, you can't trust these people. Well, when you have that idea of not trusting outsiders, well, what does that do for people wanting to seek care? Right? Well, they don't trust it, so they don't want to seek care. So then you're kind of stuck in these patterns over and over and over again. Wow. So when we can kind of see, well, maybe some of this was also in the way that you were raised to not trust, and we can kind of dissect that a little bit, and people can begin to see where that came from, and we can say, well, maybe that was true then, and it was an absolutely valid coping style. You couldn't trust people; they were starving you there. You absolutely couldn't. You just had to be very secretive. That's not true today, and this is true with a lot of trauma. So when we deal with any trauma survivor, one of the things we assess for is, are you safe? And when they say no, then we say, okay, well, show me the danger.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's a difference between am safe and feel safe. And they're two very different things. So if you can show me the danger, then we want to get you safe. And we're going to address that because Maslow is like, you can't be in danger and do anything higher, right? But if we are safe and we just don't feel safe, then what do we need to do to begin to feel safe? And then when we can begin to feel safe, then we can move forward. That's a solvable problem in therapy. And being safe is, but it's also a little more social worky. We do some of that resourcing, but we're gonna we're gonna make sure that you're.
I want to dig into this just real quick. The 400, that is very good. The 400 years of trauma and ancestral trauma,
Intergenerational. That's the technical.
Okay. So you said it usually lands in these two buckets. One is
there's more than two. The two that have problems are those two.
Victim and numbness.
Mm-hmm.
So what's a good, for our audience especially, what's a good first step in helping them? I know there's a whole bunch of processes that go along with that, but what's really a good first step for them to, number one, recognize, but then to move forward?
Sure. And sometimes I think that's hard without a trusted person, whether it be in a relationship. So that's the value of having relationships, or whether it's with a professional or a colleague or whatnot. But for instance, with the numbing style, just be able to name it and to admit it, because that is a problem. Sometimes we have difficulty saying, I've experienced this. This is what's happened to me, because if we name it, then suddenly we're weak. You know, we're supposed to be strong, and so that vulnerability. And I love Brene Brown because she talks about the bravest thing ever is vulnerability. And I think that we talk about that other kind of generational coping style of suck it up. Well, then that is almost a numbing style, isn't it? Because we're saying pretend it didn't happen. And remember, two things can be true at the same time. You'll hear me say this over and over and over and over again, okay? So that is true on one end. We want to name it, we want to talk about it, we want to be honest about it, and we want to validate it. And we don't want to get so far that we go this other direction of, I'm helpless, there's nothing I can do, everyone's against me, and that can be problematic too. So being able to kind of recognize, where do I have power, where can I empower myself, where can I be responsible for my own safety, and where can I seek resources, and not just kind of laying down and giving up, right? Or pointing fingers at everyone else and never being willing to do this. And that's what we therapists do, because you can start out for a while doing this in the room, but eventually, if I'm doing my job, I'm going to kind of do this. And I hope that people will do this with me too all day long, right? I don't pretend to not have my own issues. I'm a human being, so yes. And I hope that people will do this for me. So.
Wow, this is really so good conversation. I told you
better.
that. Me too. I think I'm getting better. I think I'm being healed. All right, my wife will appreciate that. And so
I'll send my bill later.
she'll send the bill. I told her I got her a T-shirt. What can you expect? Really great discussion here on Talk About Unity today. I mean, she's really just opening up some really great things, and I almost don't want to stop the flow, but we've got some really great points she's making. It's just overwhelming. So make sure when you watch this thing, you watch it a few times so that you can hear what she said and you can get all these words right that she's using. And she's giving us the layman's terms. She's not even going really deep. I've got to call Jana for that. All right. So I'll be doing that later. But let's talk about because we've got some of these things in this era of social media. Does it create its own brand of trauma? Is that something that you all see that you have to deal with? How does that impact what you do?
Yeah. Yes. I'm just like, wow, yeah. In so many different ways. I think I've heard even some of my adult friends, even therapists, have lost friends and supports in the recent months, especially with the political ground, just in the social media realm. And I've had some clients coming in with things that have been misinterpreted or whatnot, that have just caused a lot of kind of like wounds on top of wounds again, because we're trying to use social media right now for a connection, because we can't go out and hang out with our friends, right? And it's just not necessarily going over well. And that's just the adults. Now, we want to get to the teenagers, the tweens, even the kids. It's not good right now, because they're just looking for, again, connection, y'all. That's what everybody wants, is connection. And they're seeking it in so many different ways, and a lot of them are just not effective, healthy, not helpful. And so I'm seeing a lot of issues, especially with my higher risk teenagers, with the social media right now.
So do we coach the kids to, hey, take a time out, or really have parents more involved in monitoring their social media activity?
So yes and yes.
Okay.
I think that we have, especially think about it now, these kids are on screens for hours and hours with their schoolwork. And we know what that does, even just with the exposure to blue light. And with some kids' brains who have ADHD and other sensory processing issues, this is really, really not good. So already we're kind of overexposed just to screens. And then we have them getting all this unlimited access to other types of screen time. So yeah, parental monitoring I would say is a must at this point. And it's tough. I had kids, y'all, that were smarter than me. One of them is like a hacker at heart, I swear. And I mean, he could outsmart me, but didn't mean I gave up trying. Okay, so I just encourage people to do the best they can. I know we're not all IT experts. There are great apps and tools available to help parents with this, but absolutely believe that should be monitored and reduced as much as possible. And we know there's, again, going back to data, research, I'm all about it. Those kids who spend more time on social media actually report more depression and poorer outcomes than those who don't. So that should be telling us something about social media in our adolescents.
Okay, and we're going to head into our final break. And so I want to ask you this question, and we'll ask this question on the other side of the break when we come back, as we'll be closing out. I want to ask you about virtual counseling.
Okay.
Because we've talked about screen time and all that, and want to see what the benefits and things are of that, or what are the upsides, downsides. And so we'll talk about virtual counseling when we come back right after this on Talk About Unity. We're back at Talk About Unity, and Richard and I are getting our counseling session today.
Yes.
Thanks to Carrie Payton. Kelly Payton. I said Carrie.
K2.
Yeah. See, I'm easier because I'm used to saying K2. I got all these Ks in my life, so I have to number them. She's K2, which means she's vying for the #1 position. All right. But hey, so we're back, and you've given us some really great information earlier. And so let's talk about, you were talking about screen time. We've got social media, plus we have kids who are now not going to school, and so they're spending more screen time getting their education. And now I want to talk to you about virtual counseling, which would be via the screen, but something that you might need to do or have had to do because people were not able to freely move about due to COVID. So how has that impacted both your line of work and the quality of your work?
So, there was definitely a time initially where we moved almost 100% online. Just because I think everyone thought that's what we were supposed to do.
And were you all still going into the office and doing it from there, or were you all doing it from?
Some weren't. We left it up to each clinician what they were comfortable with.
Okay.
So if they wanted to come in, they could. I mean, you're behind a closed door anyway. It didn't matter. You have good internet. But some of us just did it from home. I'd say myself, I'm about 50-50 right now. It's not horrible, but when you're talking about very young children, their language is play, their language is toys. It's very hard to get them to stay engaged on a screen with a person. Now give them a video game, maybe they'll do it, but they've got distractions, and it's a lot harder to do the work. Now we have, a network of about 35,000 play therapists from across the world that have come together to kind of almost really redesign, although I know teleplay therapy was happening before, but really to get even better at it, I think, in this emergency situation. And it's a great medium for a lot of people. In fact, we have some people who've decided they want to stay this way. This is really fitting their lifestyle. They don't have to leave the office. They can do whatever. And then we have some that they just don't have access to a private space. I've had people who've been deported or who have, had their internet cut off because of someone, so we had all kinds of interesting situations that have come up, or that I've heard about in the community at least, that just don't make for good care. Sometimes it was cool because I got to go into the home and really get to see the family system in their environment, which was really kind of neat. But on the other hand, long term, it was just not great for some people. And if you're in a really more crisis situation, you're getting worse. Then that was really indication that they needed to come back in person. So I just think there's things that kind of can get missed without having that like face-to-face neurological interaction.
That's really big. And so let's talk about your team. Let's talk about your team and you. I mean, this has got to be kind of overwhelming this time. And like you said before, this is probably the apex, or this is the highest level you've ever seen in this industry. So how do you cope? How do you do self-care? How does that work for you?
Yeah, so I've had to be really intentional about my own self-care. I actually rented a treadmill to bring into the house so that I could have that in the house when I couldn't get out for my walks, just because I need that. I personally know myself enough to know I need to get physical energy out. There are times where breathing, meditating, prayer are enough for me, or what I need in that moment. And then there are other times where I need physical energy to get that out. So for me, that's exercise. And then just trying to stay in touch with my friends and family, via the tools that we do have, whether it's FaceTime or telephone. I've had a few in-person, type of gatherings outdoors, spaced apart. Just recently had one Friday with a bunch of friends I hadn't seen in a year, and then just really trying to take care of the little simple pleasures, right? Making sure I'm taking care of my body, taking time to read, just play with my dog, go to the dog park, lots of time outside for me, because that's just what fills my bucket, right? And so I think we discount these little things a lot, but we have to be really intentional about it. And so that's important. And as a team, we're all feeling the stress. So it's making sure that we have really good boundaries. I think a lot of, myself included, therapists have been like, oh, we're virtual now, we can just go ahead and add more cases on our load. And you have to really watch out for that, because there's a mental and emotional load that we carry. And we can't ignore that, because as soon as we do, our quality of care then begins to decline. And more than ever now, I'm getting emails, calls, text messages, from clients trying to manage crisis situations. So there's only so many of those I can take on my caseload. I also deal with high conflict divorce cases with children, and those take a lot of energy too. So being just really intentional about your own boundaries and what you're willing to say yes to and what you're going to say no to. And I think helping our team manage that has been important. But it's also been very disconnecting for us. Like I said, we're a family, and as a family who's now been disconnected and hasn't been able to all be together in a while, we've tried to have like virtual happy hours, and we've given little care baskets to them, and but it's been tough because we haven't all been together as the little family we are. So we try
to shift from we had balance in your other footprint before COVID, and then now with COVID to find this new balance, and then hopefully with vaccines and progressing with these new therapies, we can go back. But I don't think this new normal, I don't want it.
Yeah.
But then to go back to some semblance of a normal, I think is going to be a challenge, even though we want it.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about your family. How do they? I mean, you're a therapist, so you come home and you're hanging with your kids and your husband. How does that hang in the house? Because I'm thinking, she's trying to analyze me. She's trying to do this. I mean, you got to have all kinds of challenges at home. I mean, I think my wife's a lawyer, and so I'm going. I have to play I'm not one of your clients, So how does that work in your household? Just a personal question.
So let me just clarify this right now for anybody out there. We therapists are not analyzing everybody everywhere we go. We want to.
But we think that you are.
I know.
We think that you are.
Which I think is just as exhausting.
Yeah.
Like, no, I'm just trying to be a friend here. And
imagine, but when you got teenagers, imagine you telling your kids something Now, you get that. You would get that as a parent. So now they're thinking you're doing your job for
Yes,
me.
yes, the
Mom,
struggle
I'm
is
not-
real.
I'm not one of your clients.
I remember my middle son, he's my genius kid, and he's the hacker I was telling you about. He would watch me read these books, right? And because remember, I am a teen and child specialist, so what are my books going to be
Oh,
about?
my goodness.
Mostly about teens and children and how to raise them and whatever. And he said, well, I just don't trust you because you don't seem to know what you're doing. You keep having to read all these different books. So I died. So it was funny, but you know, I think they do think sometimes that I'm trying a technique on them or whatnot. And in some ways, my husband will tell you, has my language shifted over the years? Yes, it has. You know, we evolve. So some of my perspectives have changed. The way maybe I talk about things may change. I love to talk about personality and Myers-Briggs types, so I'll talk about that all day long. So it's my interest, it's my passion, so it does come out in the family, but I'm not like always going, let me look at their family and see if I can figure out what's going on with them and how do I, manipulate them to do that. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that.
Wow, this is really great, and this is like I said, we could go on for another hour, but our time is up, and we really want to thank Kelly Payton for being here. She's provided some very valuable insight and some really great needed therapy that that our country really needs. So play this back, have your friends watch this because there's a lot of good information, and of course you can always look up West Houston Counseling. They're booked, I'm sure, but you can always try to get some help from them. And it's just really been a really great show. So I want to thank Kelly, thank my co-host Richard. It's been a great time here. Talk about unity, and I tell you what, eventually we'll have to have you back, but we got to get you back out there doing the work so that we can save the world like you need to.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, well, thank you for being here. This is Talk About Unity on the Edge Radio Network. Join us again next week, 10 a.m. on Tuesday on the Edge Radio Network. Talk About Unity.